He's not a bat, he's a man who fights crime. And we're gonna watch him fight for a minute at a time. With John and Niall and a guest who doesn't rhyme. It's Bat Minutes!
Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Bat Minutes of the Phantasm. This is the podcast where we study every tooth and cranny of a Batman Mask of the Phantasm, one flying tooth at a time, I guess. I'm one of the hosts, Niall McGowan.
Here to take a bite out of the minute. It is I, John Parker, your other host.
But might as well hop on into it, because me and John would usually have a little back and forth now, but why dilly-dally?
Yeah.
Let's go. We're, of course, again, joined today by the guests who were on just the other day. It's Mark and Nathan.
Oh, hello. It's us again.
Hey.
Thank you. And we are here cheesing from cheek to cheek.
Hey.
It's it's one of those, again, one of those minutes where like, is much happening, or is it just like it's big in many respects, but it's also just a good old fashioned is Batman and the Joker having a fight.
Yeah,
like what are the odds these two guys getting together and having a tussle? But it's one of those classic things. Like you see it so often, but at the same time, we spend so much time dodging around. Like we're doing everything. Like the main thing is always these two guys fighting, and then we finally come back to where the center of what Batman usually is. These two guys having fisticuffs. So,
dudes being guys is really what it
What's
is.
better than this? Guys being dudes.
This is how guys, are friendly to each other, right?
I mean, like one of the great romances, the more tragic romances than Bruce and Andrea was Batman and the Joker.
Yeah, in some ways it is a love, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, by all means. Absolutely. Comedy and tragedy, you know.
Yeah, classic. Yeah, they are. It's almost as if you could have like two facial expressions and then put them together.
Almost as if they were both born out of a theater or something.
What?
Ridiculous. But today we're here to specifically talk about minute 66, which opens with a clash from a Chrysler, and it ends a minute later with the drone of some drones. Yeah, so we pretty much get straight into it. Like, we had a little calm before the storm there, apart from Batman getting lightly grazed by a model car and going, ah!
Yeah, like it was the most painful thing in the world.
Like, oh, God damn it. If it stubbed his toe, I'd understand. But it was at the side. Come on.
Yeah, and the only thing I can think of is maybe it's supposed to scare the audience, be like, oh no, he's been like stabbed in the back or something. And then you look, and then it's like, it's actually just a toy car, right? It's just a miniature. So maybe it's like you see Joker creeping up in this Chrysler building facade, and you think like he's going to hurt him then. So they trick you, like they make you look at one hand while the other hand's about to strike from behind, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I guess that's the suspense. It's like, oh, he's been hurt. It's like, nope, not yet. Now he's hurt.
Yeah. And when you see him get hurt, they ain't shying away from it this time. It's such a blow of just Joker appearing out of nowhere, and just friggin' clattering him over the head with this.
That's when you need the Bugs Bunny like Looney Tune whop sound that happens. A big hammer.
Well, this whole scene, but especially when Joker uses this sort of end piece as he tries to use it as like a knife to stab Batman. All I could think of was the ending of Hot Fuzz. You know, when he gets, what's his name, the character?
Skinner.
Skinner. And he goes flying and he falls on the model village like church spire and it goes through his mouth. And it's just like, oh, Jesus Christ. It's horrific. Imagine if that happened to the Joker. Yeah.
I remember that bit of it was that. I don't know. Maybe Edgar Wright saw the same thing, because I remember in the 90s when I was a kid, there was a show called Police Camera Action.
Oh, yeah.
Where they just showed you like weird, not even weird, just like they're starved for content on the BBC. So like, here's some cases that the police were working on.
Yeah, you just follow the police on like a day, don't you?
And one of them was like some kid had tried to climb over a fence that had like a little spike thing, and he fell.
Oh.
And the spike went up through the bottom of his chin, and it was up like through his mouth. And he was alive. It was like
All
he
right,
was.
post the link. I gotta watch. Hold on.
But it was apparently, he was just stuck there for ages. It's just like, oh, get me out.
Ages.
Yeah, he was there for like a couple. So they had to get obviously a fire brigade to like, so what do we do? Do we take the thing out, or we just try to lift him up off it, or like what? How do we get around
You have
this
to
and
cut
stuff?
the spike off, take him to the hospital with it in his jaw.
Yeah, and then you got to oof.
But then he'd be raging over the property damage. I was like, you could have just lifted him up and got him off that thing. Now you've ruined the fence over here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I do think that would be such a cool ending for the Joker. Because he doesn't die necessarily. As you say, that kid was fine. Get taken away. But that would be awesome if that happened here in this fight.
Yeah.
It's comical how you just like casually describe this television show where you followed cops. That's a big thing here.
I was gonna ask. Yeah, I was like, do you guys?
We have
do you guys
cops.
have cops?
Cops is
Do you
a
guys
big
watch
deal
Cops?
here.
Do you guys
We did, actually. It was one of the few that made its way over, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
I think it had such a cultural impact that they were like,
It did.
The UK was like, we gotta see this cops thing. Like you keep referencing it in other TV shows over there. We gotta see what this is.
But then
I
They
don't
went
know
further.
what it's like to you guys, obviously.
It's a whole thing. I mean, they even have campus PD now, which is like, but it's college kids on campus and they're cops, and it's just parties.
Well, here the whole sort of idea was to watch it. How do I say this nicely? To laugh and be like, "Isn't America crazy?"
that's what I was gonna ask. Are you watching America Cops? Are you watching? You're watching our content?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Oh my god,
That's
okay.
awesome.
That's so great. That's like so many of those episodes happen in Florida. Like,
Oh, okay. So it is a known thing over there that it is a crazy show. Okay, good.
very, very. Yeah.
Everyone is weird. Everyone.
Then on Cops though, that also made its way into an outro earlier in the season though, when Batman's getting chased by the police of Bat Boy, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come
For you.
I do wonder though if whoever wrote this scene in particular had always looked at the Chrysler building and wondered what it would be like to like stab someone with the spire at the top.
Yeah, they
it's
had to have.
Yeah, it is. One of those, it looks like almost like a fencing foil. It's not so much like an actual blade, but it's like a fencing foil he's jabbing him with.
Oh yeah.
I just love it as a concept, and this whole thing is like, obviously because Mark, you are familiar with such scenarios as giant monsters attacking
This is what I'm
cities.
known for now, is it? It's like it wouldn't be the first
Yeah,
time.
very much so.
Yeah, so, but it's there's so much in here, and I was going to mention it earlier when we started the episode. Is that normally with action minutes, when you're doing a minute by minute podcast, and sometimes when there's dialogue or something, there's a lot you can break down a lot, and then when there's action scenes, sometimes you're like, well, it is action, I don't know how much there is to talk about it. But this minute here, of course, it's an animated movie, so there's a lot of thought and detail put into everything that goes on here. But I mean, throughout the minute, I was going to mention it in yesterday's minute or Wednesday's minute, and then I was thinking, do I need to say it? Is it really that? But the Chrysler building, and Nate had mentioned Godzilla, which is a character I'm really familiar with. And I was just thinking like, oh, that reminds me of the 1998 Roland Emmerich Godzilla. Where, you remember when Godzilla was inside the building for some reason and came through
right.
Yeah,
with all the helicopters? And man, what a time. What a film.
That movie is baffling. Like at one point he just disappears. At one point, it's like, how do you lose track of Godzilla?
It's incredible, and that was filmed with. I mean, that movie is surprisingly full of miniature usage, and you would think like it's all just a big CGI thing, which is why everyone hates it. But when you go back, there's so much to love about that movie. It's really just, I think, it became like in the shadow of Jurassic Park, and so that's why like the third act, they're like, we need it to be like Raptors now.
Yeah, but like that came out in like what 98.
Yeah,
right?
like a
So-
year after Lost World, and so they were like,
Yeah, so I would have been 11 years old, an 11-year-old boy sitting watching that, going like, oh, they're ripping off Jurassic Park because now they'll just be with mini Godzillas, and it's exactly like the Velociraptors.
Yeah.
And you're like,
It's exactly.
I'll tell you,
man,
though, that's
like,
why
I'm
I
jaded
liked
already.
it, because as a Jurassic Park person, I didn't care that it was repeating it. I was like, brilliant. Yeah, this is what I'm here for.
I think I fell in that same boat as well, where I was just like, this is just great. This is just giant dinosaur in a city,
Yeah.
you know? Something that we didn't get very much of in the Lost World.
No.
No.
Well, the thing is, we got too much of it. But I think that's the worst part of the Lost World is the San Diego.
Oh yeah, for sure,
Rampage,
hands
but-
down. That shouldn't be. Yeah, that shouldn't be a thing.
I think
But,
the
you know.
problem is that they clearly just went, let's make a kind of connection to King Kong. Just do it like King Kong, but it's a T-Rex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it was thrown together at the last minute too. I think that was filmed in like a week or something, and there was like, I think Spielberg, like one person said to him like, I think that's a bit of a weak ending, and he's like, all right, we're going back, we're shooting the whole thing, and like that's why Pete Postlethwaite isn't there, is because he was busy. That's why like so Vince Vaughn's not there. He's one of the main characters. Like no, he's gone too, was busy. So the entire like the climax of Lost World doesn't involve half the key cast because they were gone at that point because they just decided to film it off the cuff.
Oh, that's mad.
And
Whoa.
I think, and it's a super long tangent, but of course, The Lost World, the movie, I think the book as well. I mean, Michael Crichton's trying to tap into that original story, The Lost World, to go to an island full of dinosaurs and like this isolated part of time. And Spielberg, that the movie is very much like a King Kong movie. Like that's what he wanted. He wanted to make a King Kong movie, much like Eiji Tsuburaya, the tokusatsu like set designer for all these Gojira movies from Toho and stuff. Like he too was like, oh, I saw King Kong as a child and I love that. I want to do that for Japan. And so Godzilla is a love letter to King Kong and the beasts of 20,000 fathoms and all that stuff. And just happened to have a very strong political commentary and allegory, and that's what made Godzilla so successful now, that we think of Godzilla more so as the king of the monsters in monster movies than even King Kong. But yeah, King Kong inspired Steven Spielberg with The Lost World, and so yeah, the when you rewatch The Lost World and you see them going on this island full of dinosaurs and they take one back to San Diego, it's like, oh yes, Steven Spielberg wants to have his King Kong moment. He's definitely all intentional.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like there's the King Kong stuff comes back at the end of this minute with the planes. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very much so. I didn't even think of that.
yeah.
It's so much damage that movie though, because I think apparently that was John Peters' whole. That's why you wanted that spider in Superman Lives, was because he had like. He remembered. I remember Kevin Smith talks about. He said like, John Peters told him like, I remember seeing King Kong as a boy, and when the gates opened and you saw the huge ape, it was just the greatest thing I'd ever seen. So I want a sequence where the doors open and there's a giant spider there. So yeah, the legacy of that that stop motion ape, just those gates opening. Jeez Louise.
God damn you, King Kong.
Wait, so now I don't want to rewatch the Flash movie, but I do now need to rewatch that part. Are there big doors that open for the spider?
No. He's fighting like several smaller spiders and stuff as well. Yeah.
Plus, don't we
he's
join him
just
in
in
the
the
middle
cave.
of the fight?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a.
And this as well. I mean, obviously, of course, as we're talking about, it made me think of a Godzilla, Gojira, kaiju kind of fight. But also connected to that, you'll appreciate this, Niall. I think all I could think of as well was Crank 2.
Oh yeah.
When it literally they turn into kaiju.
Yeah, I think that was when Crank 2 ascended into full-blown glory. It was already great, and then there's just a bit where like the two of them get like they're fighting amongst like electrical pylons or something. Yeah, they both get knocked into them, and then inexplicably morph into like it's like a guy in a kind of cartoon giant version of Jason Statham's face.
Yeah, giant mask.
And the two of them are just smashing the crap at each other amongst like, and there's like little figurines like pointing up at them and stuff as well. They're clearly just toys. Yeah. And it's just like it does that for like 5 minutes, and then it just gets back to Crank 2, and you're like, okay, this movie is like. I remember my friend saw it before me, And he was like, "Oh no, it's terrible. Oh my god, so silly. All the stuff in it was so stupid." And I watched it and I was like, "That was the greatest film ever made. Everything in it was so stupid."
It is perfection, and that's what this reminded me of, because it's going for that. Because they're in a model village, so that is literally how kaiju fights would happen. They'd make a little tiny city and then they smash them over.
I think the purpose of it here is like it's twofold. In that, it's. Apparently, the writers have said it's an homage to like the Dick Sprang era of Batman, where every other issue he would be fighting in a giant thing. Like there's always some weird took inspiration. Like both you guys were in the script read for Batman '84, right? Like we did that a couple of years ago. Climax of that movie takes place on a giant typewriter. And like in a weird, a whole museum full of weird giant things, and it's all very playful. And then Rupert Thorne gets knocked into a giant pencil sharpener and like crushed, sliced to death and stuff. It's like, holy moly, God almighty. But yeah, so the concept, and I think even like one of the cartoons, Legends of the Dark Knight, one of the later animated series episodes, where the kids are talking about what they think Batman is like, and there's a whole sequence with the Joker. In Batman fighting the Joker in amongst like a giant piano and stuff like that. So they're kind of going like, this is the closest we'll get to it, because we can't just have him in a giant typewriter or whatever, because that would be stupid. But we can set up the scenario of like it's a model city, and it's like the two of them are like, it's like Mothra and Godzilla going at each other. But I also think there is a little commentary, because the whole thing about like the world of tomorrow was this bright, shining, promising thing that was in Bruce and Andrea's future, and it was left to it just decayed and rotted away. And then the thing that was at the center of it was the Joker, that was Batman's future the whole time. And to have a version of Gotham where these two titans, the two big things of Gotham, are Batman and the Joker, literally destroying the city as they go along. It's kind of a commentary on their relationship in general. It's like these two guys, this relationship they have, it's destroying Gotham basically because
I love it. That's how I took it. That's exactly how I took it. Like, these are Gotham City's biggest icons. I mean, why not make them giant monsters fighting in a miniature city that is just wreaking havoc all over the place? Without any care to anything that's happening. It's just the two of them constantly fighting endlessly throughout time. It's Batman and Joker. I also think there's a couple references to like even older detective comics covers where it would be like Batman, a big Batman, and then tiny cityscape under him kind of thing. There's one image that I'm thinking of where it's just him overlooking the city, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. Just the image of Batman and his stage is Gotham City. So this is obviously where their fight is going to take place. And what better way to do it than make them, 20 feet tall and just owning the entire place.
Well, 20 feet tall is not that tall.
All right. What do you, 20 stories? Is that better?
Hey, so, I mean, the Chrysler Builder is probably taller than that.
A little bit taller. But yeah, but it's a fantastic display of animation. I think my favorite part just has to be, after Joker tries to take a stab at Batman, he gets kicked in the teeth. And, we see that infamous tooth get knocked out. To see, as monsters would in kind of like a tokusatsu film, where like the building behind crumbles down. It's a very beautifully animated building that's collapsing behind Joker that he crashes into. It very much feels like, that's how Eiji Tsuburaya and I think more modern day now is Shinji Higuchi did Shin Godzilla or Shin Gojira. He's an amazing set designer and special effects supervisor. I believe he also worked on the Gamera trilogy in the 90s, which is another fantastic set of movies. I mean, if there's people would talk about Godzilla a lot and like the great movies that Godzilla has been in, but what am I trying to say? Like, not many of those Godzilla movies hold a candle to the 90s Gamera trilogy as far as like the story, the way it's shot, the way the special effects are done. Those are just fantastically made masterpieces, and the special effects are top notch. Beautiful movies, and the way that this building crumbles just reminds me of that, and all the time that they go into making a building crash and destroy. But it's that Joker, he crashes into the building, it collapses, and then the shadow of Batman like rising up in the background. It's like such a cool shot. That's like, I love this minute specifically for that moment.
Oh no, it is terrific. It's almost as if like, because a lot of those kind of things too, they'd always like, it feels like they're slowing down the footage. The sort of like, so it always looks as if a monster going into a building is going into it in slow motion. Sort of thing. I'm sure there's probably practical reasons for that, but it almost feels as if they've slowed down the Joker as well as he's going into the crumble. But yeah, that is a beautiful shot. Actually, you have the old school Batman. There's no detailing. It's just like the blue of the cape, his eyes, and you don't see his face or anything. It's just that classic sort of fearsome silhouette, or a silhouette with like a little tinge more.
Yeah,
it makes him spooky. I like it whenever they make Batman a bit scary.
And of course, just that was talked about, like how much they were able to sort of push the gamut this movie in terms of violence and stuff. But I think when I was a kid, I didn't appreciate it as much like throughout the most of the movie, because like, you know, Buzz Bronski getting crushed by a statue, I was just like, well, you know, I saw Matt Hagen get stuff forced down his throat to become Clayface and then melting. Like, I wasn't all that bad. But I do remember when I first watched it, the fact that the Joker's tooth came flying out, and like, whoa, like, you don't see that in the cartoons usually. Like,
that seems more violent to me. Yeah, that there's physical injury to that extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of my. I think that might be just a thing with me, because I used to always have. Is the bane of my existence, almost my own personal bane. Is that like I always used to have like nightmares about losing my teeth. Like,
that's a common one, you know.
Yeah. They say it's always mixed up with like financial worries and stuff like that. But then, ironically, within the last year, I have lost 2 teeth because at night I grind my teeth in my sleep.
Yeah, I do
and
that.
Then, and then even got like the little guard now. It's worn down to nothing. But like through doing that, I end up cracking 2 teeth. And this is my darkest fears were coming through. I was like, God damn it! So yes. Although actually talking about fears and stuff though, and the potential for Gotham's future, I kind of thought like now would be a good time a thing I have been hanging on to for a bit of just bring up a random thing that's only really come to light recently. That, of course, you know, Batman animated series is very acclaimed for like bringing back a dark version of Batman to kids' TV. Mm-hmm. And you know, most of this film was written by a guy called Alan Burnett. And recently, someone discovered a script treatment that Alan Burnett did in September 3rd of 1984 for a TV show called The Secret Files of the Batman. And Alan Burnett's not really talked about this himself, but it was an entire pitch to spin off from what they called the show. It was like the Superpowers Team Galactic Guardians, which was like, you know, you had the Super Friends, which was like the goofy, you know, it was the Justice League show way back in the 70s, very campy.
Yeah.
And then you had, it was the one that, you know, apparently when they tried to bring in Darkseid, the networks were really like, you can't, like, Darkseid sounds scary. You can't have a guy called Darkseid in here, and like, you know, they'd have things like, oh, Robin been shrunk and, you know, fighting a spider and knocking the spider off a table. And like, you have to show that the spider's okay and stuff, though, because the kids will be worried about the spider. All that level of censorship. You know, you wouldn't get someone's tooth getting knocked out with a big spray of blood and stuff happening. But no, apparently from that, because Alan Burnett worked on that show. And then if you watch the Superpowers Team, Galactic Guardians, there's a very notable episode called The Fear, wherein they bring in the Scarecrow. And Batman at this point is voiced by Adam West again. Like it was Oren Sewell for a long time, then they brought in Adam West to do this. In the show, you get like Jack Angel, who was the voice of Smokey the Bear in one of our earlier episodes, John.
Everything's connected.
Ernie Hudson was Cyborg, all this kind of stuff. And they bring in the Scarecrow, who was voiced by the guy who did the owl in Winnie the Pooh, which is like, all right, okay. And if you watch that episode, you can get, I think it's not like anywhere to watch digitally, but you can see quite a bit of it on YouTube. it's so weirdly atmospheric because Batman goes into an alleyway, which we later find out is Crime Alley, and he's just like paralyzed with fear. And like, there's a big scene of Casey Kasem Robin talking to him, and the water's just running down Bruce's face, and he's proper paralyzed with fear, and he just runs off. And Robin's like, Batman, and there's no music, and it just lets it. You just hear the sounds of the rain for a bit and stuff. And you find out later he lays out the entire thing about like Batman's origin story. And beyond Adam West very quickly mentioning in the 60s show, yes, my parents were murdered by a mugger. Yeah, and now I'm Batman.
That's all he needs to mention, yeah.
Yeah, this was the first time outside of comics that someone had dealt with, the concept. And then the Scarecrow's whole scheme is that he's going to trap Batman within Crime Alley forever. Until he dies by like capturing Robin and Wonder Woman and then keeping him there, and he has like a fear ray or whatever. But if you watch the episode, it's like this is good. This is like those Super Friends episodes are terrible, but this is like an atmospheric kind of thing. It turns out that's because it was originally developed as an episode for The Secret Files of the Batman, which was a show that Alan Burnett pitched. And it's fascinating. This is you get a couple of pages of this thing he laid out, but you get like all the characters they're going to bring in. Harvey Bullock was one of them, who was relatively new to the comics at the time. Vicky Vale was going to be a major character in it and love interest to Bruce Wayne. This is predating the '89 movie as well, so this would have been like people wouldn't have known who Vicky Vale was at the time, unless you were a hardcore comics person. Then notably, Lucius Fox was going to be in it. But they misspelled his name by adding an O, so it's Luscious Fox.
Oh, Luscious Fox. I like that.
I say mistakenly, but I don't know. Maybe it depends on what the characterization was going to be. Maybe he was a Luscious Fox.
Who doesn't want to be known as a Luscious Fox?
Yeah. And then, they had a character brought in who apparently was from the comics called Olivia Ortega, who was going to be a rival journalist to Vicky Vale. And her whole thing was that in the comics, she was dead set against Arthur Reeves. Well, of course, ended up been in this very movie. But and then her thing was that she was going to be kind of a quasi-antagonist because she's like determined to find out who Batman is. So it's kind of Vicky Vale, rival to Olivia Ortega, who is dead set on covering the identity of Batman. And when they list like all the villains and stuff, it's all like lesser known villains. At the time would have been like Ra's al Ghul, Scarface, all this stuff, like things that have been big in the comics but never done on the 60s TV show or anything. And so, the whole thing was like, this is going to be a serious version of Batman. And this is 1984. And the thing is, though, the one episode outline they gave involves a ripoff of You Only Live Twice, where Ra's al Ghul is stealing spaceships. Like, up in space, he's just getting a thing come along and swallow them, and then stealing the spaceships for himself. And it's like, that's all right, that's been done. And also, that's silly as man. That is old school 60s Batman stuff. But and then Batman Batman jumping off a rocket ship and then using a balloon to get back down to Earth and stuff. And it's like, I don't know how dark you were planning to make this, but yeah. But it's just a weird entity that's only really come to light in the last couple of years. So people have mentioned to me previously about like the Fear episode of Galactic Guardians, but I don't think they realized like that was originally developed to be the pilot episode of The Secret Files of Batman. And for whatever reason, that ended up just getting put on ice. It was just like, no, just set aside. They're obviously developing the Tom Mankiewicz movie script that we ended up doing the script read of around the same time. And then Batman's just sort of out of the ether for a couple of years until then 89 comes around. And as we covered there previously in previous episodes, like Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski are like sort of, they pitch a Batman show when they're just told Warner Brothers is developing a Batman show. Someone come in with an idea, and they were just left to show run it and panicking because they didn't know what to do. And then out of nowhere, Gene McCurdy brings in Alan Burnett to be the story editor, probably because now we know he was already working on a very similar show like nearly 10 years prior. So, but that was just thinking of like, this is the Gotham that could have been. There is the TV show that could have been. We might have had. It could have legit been Adam West as a more dark, serious version of Batman on TV back in the day. But yeah, that is the tale of The Secret Files of the Batman.
No, that was fantastic. I mean, it just to see the evolution of the character in media and how it's gone to where we are now. I mean, we're talking about a movie that came out in 1993, but still, so much came before it to evolve into what we have now. I mean, going from Detective Comics to every project iteration to create the character, and then even in today with all the Batman movies we have. I mean, even some people watch Matt Reeves' the Batman now, and already forget the road that it took to get to that movie, and all you know the history of, it was supposed to be Ben Affleck and all this other stuff came before it, and then they start talking about George Miller's Justice League, and so like it all has evolved to where we are now. So it's always fascinating to think about how this.
You guys should organize a script read yourselves of that George Miller script.
Oh, I don't know how to read, so.
Oh. But yeah. So then you get the Joker sort of again, almost like predating Joel Schumacher by throwing a little surfing action in there. Like sort of like surfing on this train as it goes along the tracks.
I like that though, because if it was if it's some versions of the character, I wouldn't. But this version of the character, it's very him. It's great. It's practical and fun.
Yeah. Although thankfully it is going fast too, because like seeing some of those model trains, you'd be like, "Drat, he's very slowly getting away."
Yeah.
Of course, no. He's hold out his multi-purpose remote to get these drones to appear out. of it.
The universal remote that he's got here, the one thing from the future.
Yeah, these things like the propellers slice and dice Batman to pieces. Jesus.
Yeah. And I think that's another kaiju tokusatsu thing that I enjoy is that one, there's two things you must always have in tokusatsu film, a monster movie, special effects movie, is that planes, obviously, right? I mean, Marion C. Cooper with King Kong, and then Eiji Tsuburaya with Gojira, he wanted to do the planes as well, but the train as well, right? So King Kong has a little train sequence, and now Godzilla, whenever Godzilla has like a solo film that tries to return to the roots, there's always a train involved. So when I seeing this minute and seeing that it has the planes and it has the train, and I was like, there it is. The two things you always have in these movies is a showcase of trains and planes, and then even the moment when Batman gets bonked over the head and he falls, and there's a shot of the streets, and it has like little miniatures waiting for a train, and if you were just to pause there, it'd be like, that just looks like a nice establishing shot of the city, and then boom, this giant Batman falls on top of it like a monster. It's like, it's just like they capture all these viewpoints of what a giant monster movie looks like.
It really is just like straight up a kaiju film, but with Batman and Joker. Like it's all the beats of it. I mean, storyboard wise in general too. I mean, this is King Kong.
Yeah.
It's great.
I think it's a love letter just as much as Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim is, right? Because he does all those things where he's using the small miniatures, he's playing with it. It's all a love letter to those past movies, and he does all these kind of things where he has fun with these toys, these literal toys. And so, yeah.
I was kind of surprised though. Again, much like anytime we come across any other property referenced, you're always kind of like, has Batman ever fought Godzilla in comics or something? Like that seems like a thing that should have been.
He's about to.
Really? They're doing a Batman versus Godzilla movie.
Godzilla, 100%. The Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong comes out in October.
Oh my god, that's ridiculous, but in the best way.
And
I mean, we gotta. All right, then we're gonna be. That's coming up during the hiatus. I guess we're gonna be covering that whenever it lands.
I'm up for it.
Batman has a Bat Jaeger.
A Batman's, he's got a Batman Jaeger suit. And it works perfectly.
Of course he does. Of course he does.
So, and there's another thing we have to. Guillermo del Toro, he really popularized the word kaiju, so I have to let it go. Everyone knows that word now. I'm thankful everyone does, but it's that, and then the Jaeger suit, the giant mechs. now.
I feel like when I use the word kaiju, I'm using it in its most literal definition of referring to the giant monsters.
Well, kaiju means monsters. I mean, people are supposed to be saying dai kaiju, but they don't. Nobody says dai kaiju.
Okay.
It's just kaiju. It's monster.
I just remember there was what do you call it? Dark Knight's death metal. You know, they had Dark Knight metal, but I remember wasn't there one too? Where there was like an alternate version of Batman where they played on the whole thing of him like Batman is Gotham City, like he is like he is the city and the city is him. Where like Bruce was dying, and so he sacrifices Damian to some sort of occult monster to imbue his essence into the buildings of Gotham. And then it becomes like a big Gotham building monster that is controlled by Bruce Wayne.
Yes.
But he's evil and stuff.
Slightly too far, I think.
Yeah. I remember we watched that. I was like, oh, it's like Bat Kaiju, but it's also like, wait, what? He killed his kid so he could be a building?
Wouldn't we all do the same?
Yeah.
But that's again, everything about the metal stuff was just like, all right, we're just swinging for stuff here. See whatever sticks. It's like, oh, the Batman who laughs, whatever.
I was buying it all at first, and after a little while, I was just like, no, I'm out. It's how do I say it nicely? It's clearly designed for people who just are like weird edgelords to be like, oh, look at this, it's so cool.
Yeah. Oh man, like the Batman who last killed like 5 million people with the one flick of his wrist.
It was
Although I'm talking about like armor and stuff though, because Batman is attacked then by these drones, and like we mentioned it many times before, but like this was like R. Pattinson. These things would like he's getting cut to shreds by these things because he's just wearing a friggin' leotard. It's like
he needs some armor.
Yeah, if our bats was there, those things would just bounce off him, and they'd be like, "What?" Like it's a little model plane, man. But yeah, the Joker's actually got the drop on Batman with these things like friggin' flying and literally cutting him to ribbons over here. So
it's quite terrifying. I mean, I just think about it like, wow, that's really sharp. Those things are it's incredibly
and the noises
sharp.
coming out of them, considering they're just meant to be like fun drones, presumably for a display. I would think that's where he got them, but they sound like they're actual planes from the Second World War.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't it seem not of
like
the
they're
future?
Mustangs? It's like you get the troops down on the ground just like cheering, yeah, because they just hear the hum of the engine just fly by. Yeah,
basically, yeah, they might as well be real planes. These.
Also, the thing too, the Joker jumps off the train. And then he has a little lever to go to his bomb, which is in the oven. Is it in the oven, or is it supposed to be inside the robot?
One Gotham roast, well done, right?
That would have been a great line if he had said that. We had earlier in the movie when he comes at Andrea with a whisk. And we're like, he should be saying like, "Let me whisk you away, my dear," or something like that. That line is just not in the movie.
Now, I thought the bomb was in the robot, but now you're making me think it's in the oven, and I kind of love that.
So if it was in the oven, then it should be like, one Gotham roast coming up. Yeah. It's like, oh god damn it! But if maybe it's supposed to be within Hazel, because they have a shot.
It's a robot, right? The robot's got blinking lights and an antenna on it. That just to me that seems like okay, it's a receiver.
But those lights turned on as soon as she went homicidal earlier, like when the Joker.
Yeah, that was my next question. When I don't remember her. Why did the robot fall down?
Yeah, she goes homicidal. You know, look at her too. She's only on like little roller things. She didn't stand a chance against Andrea.
Right.
It really was. Hazel was just her only programming is just to be a 2-second distraction. Like what a waste of a perfectly good. Although I guess the Joker was getting. He probably was getting quite a bit out of that robot from some things that were alluded to earlier in the movie. That's why she has this shrieking laughter. It's just like, no, that's not for attack. That's for when we were feeling the electricity that night.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's because she's lying in front of an oven.
Yeah.
My mind always goes like, oh, it's hidden in the oven. But it would make more sense if she was like if it was inside her. Maybe noted hack Chris Nolan. He saw like, the bomb in the stomach of a Joker underling. Well, I wonder if I could ever use that down the line.
Yeah, that's true. I do really enjoy the Rosie the Robot design out of this this thing, and it fits with the whole World of Tomorrow kind of deal. That just idea of a Warner Brothers Jetsons. they got these rings on their like stands, their stakes or whatever, like the bottom of this robot. And even at the top of the antenna, there's just like those little discs, those rings kind of thing. That whole idea of future tech where it's just like, oh, you still need an antenna with like receivers on it and like a dish. Like I love that.
How cute.
I now kind of want to try to animate a Jetsons opening about Batman, just like meet Bruce Wayne, just like his boy Robin, like Joker, his wife, all that business.
There you go.
Yeah, but that's very everything about Hazel is just we were mentioned earlier is based on Hazel the maid from an old TV show, but the design is very Rosie the robot from the Jetsons for sure. But yeah, and then Susie's lying there doing hysterical, rolling in the aisles. She's been left here. We just cut to a bomb somewhere, and then back to Batman. Getting his ass handed to him by these little planes.
And much like the last minute, none of this is in the draft. None of it.
I think it must have been like this is an additional action beat where they're like, you guys are running a little short, and we could do with a bit more. It's like, we just had a whole thing with a giant fan and stuff. Like, no, we need a little. It's the climax of the movie. And plus, it might have been also like we added the Joker because you were going for this no-name villain, so we had to add in a name villain to make it work.
Yeah,
and now also we want like you got to have Batman fight the Joker at some point because just having them in the rocket pack isn't enough. We want them. The kids are going to want to see them having fisticuffs and stuff. So
yeah, and make it fun. And so like start having this King Kong battle with planes, and it's all even the way that Batman gets chewed up by these planes is also kind of a reference to. I mean, King Kong gets hurt by the propellers. I think Godzilla in some films he gets sliced up just as bloody as Batman here, and it goes into like things like, oh, this is a kids movie, right? But here your protagonist is like bleeding out from being sliced open at some points.
Here's a question though: why are the planes going for him? Because it's not as if like the Joker has a little controller where he's like steering them towards him. He's just like he pressed one button, and is it like has he trained the planes to like? Is it like with a dog where he just held up a picture of Batman? He's like, go get him every time. This is the guy you're going to get. Or are they trained to like heat sensors or something where it's like anything that's...
He coded it. Joker's a coder. He's C++
he went to school for it.
Well, that's just weird. This is like they're always going for Batman. Their whole job is to like, unless it's like maybe within the world of tomorrow, they're like, there will be giant apes, but we have these planes to take care. This was part of the show originally.
Yeah. Just remove the animatronic giant King Kong.
But I should also note as well that apparently the original ending of King Kong was going to feature the Chrysler Building. It was going to be Kong on the Chrysler Building, but then the producers opted for the Empire State Building instead. So.
What was the purpose of the shift?
Well, I don't think they ever went into it. They were just like they had a bunch of options, and then they were just like, we just like the Empire State more. Just simpler to animate maybe because it's just like it's more of a kind of straight rectangle almost, whereas like Chrysler's a bit more detailed and stuff.
It's a much more iconic building to like overseas, like us. But is that cause of King Kong?
My mind was just like, I wonder if they ever had a thing where like they were going to make a Godzilla or a King Kong 2. And then he goes for like the World Trade Center. I was like, well, this time it's 2 buildings. There you go. That's how you do it, kids.
He could jump between them. Yeah.
Which he does in the 70s one, right? Because Dino De Laurentiis, right?
Oh, is the world? I never watched the 70s one because I heard it was terrible.
It's not good. I mean, you kind of watch it just because it's what Universal would base confrontation on, and so a lot of it's not good. Yeah. The characters aren't good. Like it's a very dour take on the humans. You know, like there's always like a poetic underline of what the characters, their choices that they make, and the 70s King Kong is all like, oh no, these people are inherently just they are selfish, cruel beings, and it's a very tragic ending, and there's no good ending for anyone. But in the 70s one, Kong's home, he has like these two giant. He lives in between two giant rock formations, I think, and so when he goes to New York, then he sees the Twin Towers, and he climbs up one of them, and falls from one of them.
Oh, well. I think maybe in their mindset though, it was just like it's kind of King Kong 2. 200. So, but yeah, two Kongs, two buildings. Although I haven't quickly Googled it because all I remember is like, oh, Jeff Bridges is in it, right? Seeing like, yeah, Renee Auberjonois is in it as well, apparently. So, of course, Dr. Burton from Batman Forever. There you go. But the other one thing we are asking the guests this season, though, fellas, is that because BTAS was, of course, a seminal show for people of our age way back when. What other cartoons, though, were you watching? I think is Mark going to say that goddamn Godzilla cartoon that came out after the episode?
The WB one that came out on Kids or whatever?
I have been thinking about doing a rewatch of that and maybe doing a bonus podcast for the Dueling Genre Patreon. But I haven't spoken to Scott about it yet. But I was like, I think that I could, if I had a input on Godzilla, I think that would be a good medium to start with is revisiting that cartoon based on the 1998 movie. But the cartoon show that has been so formative of my life, it has always been Ed, Edd n Eddy, which is a Canadian cartoon show. That to me is definitely the animated television series that I am so attached to. There's plenty of other cartoon shows now that I feel like capture that energy, even though that show's not around anymore. And just always show. I mean, Nate and I talk about like what Craig of the Creek and he's watching Clarence now and stuff like that. But yeah, there's so many shows. But Ed, Edd n Eddy was so formative to me. I grew up in a suburban, a cul-de-sac. I knew every kid at every house. Riding bikes to each other's houses. The 3 months that were summer break in between school, it felt just as long as them. Like it felt like school didn't exist, right? And you just had years of summer vacation, even though it was just 3 months.
You're right, though. It felt like forever, didn't it? It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I remember just going out, leaving the house, going on a bike, going anywhere, and having a bit of an allowance to go ride our bikes. I remember my brother and we would ride our bikes to like a Blockbuster that was like blocks and blocks away. and I was thinking about this now. It's like we drive cars now, and the distance that I would go on a bike is a fraction. It would take like a minute to get to this Blockbuster. But I think about how much of it was like sailing an ocean on a bike to go to a Blockbuster and buy candy. Right. And so Ed, Edd n Eddy was always that formative to me, like the way that their world changes into like this adventure all the time. Like one of the first episodes I saw of Ed, Edd n Eddy is they want to go see this science fiction movie, but it's rated R. So they try like to think of a way to get enough money to go buy a ticket, and then they end up in a junkyard and it turns into like the Space Invader. Like their imagination turns this junkyard into an alien planet. Yeah. And I just always think of like their imagination was so wild, it was like kind of formative to the way I think. And I always relate to that show a lot. The characters, the way they act, there's just so much to love about that show. I really grew attached to it.
Yeah, I'd echo Mark with that. Ed, Edd n Eddy was definitely a formative show for me, especially with like realizing the use of like soundboards and just like different sounds and third party sounds that kind of. Ed, Edd n Eddy has this great use of like Foley and stuff to like put in just ADR stuff that makes no sense and shouldn't exist in that moment, but it does, and you cannot hear it any other way after watching that show. And that was really like big for me. Just because, you know, hearing sound effects in my head as a kid was also massive. But yeah, I watched a lot of Batman. At that time, Cartoon Network was going through a big change, and I think we got a really good bit of cartoons at that time in like the mid-90s going into the 2000s. There was like What a Cartoon program and like Cartoon Planet and stuff that was happening. So like there was like that little Space Ghost spots that they would have that wasn't Space Ghost Coast to Coast. That wasn't the Adult Swim like talk show or anything. It was a silly, you know, cartoon that was 5 minutes long, and it had a couple music numbers and stuff in it. So I really liked those. I had a lot of those Space Ghost CDs, like the barbecue summer vacation CD, whatever. It was just like original music from the creators of the show, and like Les Claypool, and it's fun. But like all those, like Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, that era of cartoons that started to show up in the lineup of Cartoon Network that wasn't Looney Tunes, that was really great for me, because it was also a time where I would come home from school and watch cartoons. And in the mornings, you know, growing up in the 90s, TV time for me was like in the mornings, you know, until like lunch or whatever. And that was a lot of Looney Tunes, Tiny Toons, that whole thing of like that older WB animation. It wasn't until like a little bit later in the afternoon that we were getting like Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, that Courage the Cowardly Dog, even like that was.
Oh, Courage was great. Oh.
Yeah, like that was a show that also, you know, it freaked us out, but it was a good way where it was like, this is cool. Like this is a cartoon that I've never seen anything like it, and I am kind of weary to watch this at 7 p.m. before I have to get ready for bed.
I remember now, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Cats Don't Dance, but there was a bonus at the end of the VHS tape in which they do like the first episode of Dexter's Laboratory before it came out, I think. And it was like, oh, you know, here's a sneak peek. Warner Brothers were doing this show. Was it Warner Brothers that did Cats Don't Dance? I don't remember, but Dexter's Laboratory is there. He's making like the cookies, and Dee Dee eats one, turns into a giant kaiju, and then he gets into a giant mech and fights her in the city. And that was, so it's another one.
Yeah, I completely forgot too, like talking about like Dexter's Lab, because that was Dexter's voiced by Christine Kavanagh. And I forgot that she died. Like, I remember seeing a random thing about her during the week on my feed, and I'm like, oh yeah, the voice of Chucky and stuff, like, you know, from Rugrats. And they're like, yeah, no, she died. Like, she died a while ago. Like, and she was only like 50 or something. I was like, what? How did I not know this? But
I hadn't heard of that. Jeez.
Yeah, so the voice of Dexter, yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah, let's head off then into the dark night. Would our wonderful guests like to say where they can be found online, or promote any of your works, your many wonderful works, whatever you want?
Well, we have a podcast called DC Cinematic Minute, a movies by minute podcast that we've been doing for a while. We took a break for quite a bit to focus on Doom Patrol Radio and some pandemic things, some life changes. So we're back into recording Zack Snyder's Justice League by each individual minute. There's about 110 episodes out already, but there are more newer episodes coming out in October that feature Niall and John here as well. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, of course, we also do Doom Patrol Radio, where we talk about the Doom Patrol TV show. And while that's on hiatus as well, quite a long hiatus. I didn't think it was going to be this long. We are talking about the newest comic book run. It's a limited run. It's only 7 issues. It's called Unstoppable Doom Patrol, written by Dennis Culver and drawn by Chris Burnham. So I highly recommend that series, but I also highly recommend our podcast, where we talk about those things.
Okay, yeah, check all of those out, everybody. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. And speak to us on Facebook at the Bat-Minute Listeners Cave, Twitter at Bat-Minute, Instagram and Threads, the Bat-Minute. Again, I think I've said this before. I don't think anyone's using Threads already, but whatever. It's there. It's an option. I will get the notification if you message me there. So, yeah. And why not check out our network, Sleepy Charlie Media, on TeePublic? You can get wonderful merchandise of our beautiful, beautiful faces, or more importantly, merch calling any director you like a noted hack.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the one we always call a noted hack. It can be anybody you believe to be.
You can call yourself a noted hack.
Could be, yeah. You could be calling yourself that, really, with the way it's written. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll take 2 seconds to do as well, but I really want to throw up a t-shirt that just says, in the Batman animated series font, that just says, beat ass. Just B-E-A-T ass.
Please do. I'll buy one immediately. Yeah. So do all of that as well. And join us again next time for more Bat-Minute of the Phantasm.
Next time. And he strikes like Thunderball. The Bat's being ripped to ribbons by biplanes with no way to escape until the ingenious vigilante discovers a new use for his cape. But as the dogged detective gives chase, has he discovered the Joker's ace as the killer clown heads for outer space? The king of Lears turns amateur rocketeer next week, Batmites. Same Bat Pod, different Bat-Minute.
He must have dope,
if it be